Hello and welcome, fellow awesomeologists, to Awesomeology. I'm Sue.
And I'm Ben, and in this episode, we're talking about our process for writing a book about purpose and the strategies we're using to get that done while we're still doing all the other work,
All
emphasis on all the other
right.
work that we need to do.
Yeah, that was the big question, right? From the very beginning of this whole project. How were we going to write a book? How are we going to do our regular jobs? How are we going to do the other things that are involved in a fledgling, startup, exciting, new marketing, strategic services, etc., synergy, collaboration, all those words. Um, but so before we get into what our latest little experiment and what we're trying, let's rewind and talk about the meeting that got us to having this discussion here. One of the things we did really early on, and you already know this because you were there, was set a recurring meeting. Uh, and I think because we went through a couple of weeks after we said, yeah, let's write a book. Yeah, that's going to be great to write a book. And then we didn't do anything. So we set a recurring meeting
Yeah.
so that we would at least be responsible to talk about it at least once a month. And can you give me your flavor on how those have gone for the most part? Your
Yeah.
honest
Yeah. Well,
answer to that question, please.
sure. Honestly, it's all you can get. So, to be totally fair to ourselves, I think we should at least acknowledge that when we decided, hey, this is the thing that we're going to do, we went in with a pretty solid idea, knowing that a whole bunch of content already existed.
Mhm.
So, like, I think that's something that's given me the ammunition to like stay fired up about this project. Is I feel like we had a huge head start, before
Mhm.
even like deciding to do it. And then in those couple weeks when we made it official, and then didn't really do air quotes anything, um, we thought about it. I thought about it, and if I
Yeah.
thought about it, I'm sure you thought about it. It's just we maybe didn't capture anything or communicate between each other to share our thoughts and stuff. And that was kind of one of the early purposes for this meeting. Like any other project that's as long term as this one. Like, hey, we have to meet regularly to at least check in with each other. And like other projects like this, that it's kind of like a self prescribed deadline. Nobody's really
Mhm.
expecting this from us or anything. um, we have some comfort in setting that meeting to know, like, hey, worst case scenario, we get on that call and we each say, I've done nothing. And then we talk next steps and go from there. And spoiler alert, that has happened. And
Mhm.
that's okay. But to that point, I think, to kind of to get to the answer of your question of how I think those meetings have gone, I think generally well. I think it like never feels good to come to a meeting like that and know that you're going into it and all that you can honestly say is, yeah, I've like, besides thinking about it or knowing that I need to work on it, I've done nothing. Which, the thinking about it and knowing that you have to do it is, one of those things that is kind of a constant. It pops up when you get the free moment in your brain to be like, oh
Mhm.
yeah, that thing. Or like in my case, I have on the opposite weeks of those meetings, I have book time prescribed in my calendar to myself, which frequently gets skipped or moved over because of some other priority, right? Which is part of the reason why I would say our check-in meetings have gone less than awesome. And I guess that's partially just the nature of the beast of a project like this, where there is no like firm deadline. If we miss a deadline, no one's going to die. All of that stuff. And I think that that exists alongside some accountability on ourselves too. We're like, well, if we're constantly focused on that, that nobody's going to die and there's no deadline, well, then it will never get done. So it has been, I think that's been like the trickiest thing, or something that we um, are still figuring out, maybe
Mhm.
have started to figure out, is like, how do we keep ourselves moving forward? How do we make sure that we're being real, like accountability partners to ourselves, and not just um, justifying putting other things in front of this? And side note, the last thing I'll say, perfectly reasonable to justify other work ahead of this thing, particularly paid client work or work that we need to do to help grow our client base and all of those things, so and that's a constant challenge, and we feel that. Our leadership feels and sees that.
Mhm.
I think everybody kind of has like the same concern, like, how does this fit in with everything else that you have to do? And if we had like a perfectly crystal clear answer to that, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Right.
Um, and I think it's okay that we're kind of answering it as we go, figuring it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And I think by the nature of what we're trying to do in writing this in the first place, the writing part, at least for me, it it always has been a, the ability to write something and do it well can be a little fleeting for me. It there is this sort of it has to be next to perfect for it to really flow well and for me to move something along. And now fortunately, that quote unquote next to perfect um, atmosphere me isn't that hard to achieve. It doesn't have to be during a full moon and Aries is in Pisces, and like it doesn't have to be that perfect, but I have
Wait, it
to
wait, it doesn't.
it okay, that
Ah,
was a lie
no
when I
wonder.
told you.
No wonder I'm so behind.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't even know if Aries goes into Pisces.
Yeah.
Um, but you need I need space and time, and I need to feel relaxed, and I need you need that ramp like into a swimming pool or into a lake. You have to have that nice ramp to get you down into the water so you can swim, and
Yeah.
then you have to have time uh, to be able to get back up out of the water. So to do that and try and inject 15 minutes here or 10 minutes there and e- achieve something really good that way, that's a challenge.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, it doesn't it there was a lot about that whole concept of how do we fit this in that early on gave me you obviously already know this, gave me a lot of heartburn, and finding, especially knowing that yes, we have a lot of content for sure. Yes, we are I have no concern that the content that needs to wrap around everything and incorporate everything that we already have we could create. It's all sort of inside our noggins, or we have the resources to go and find it in the world, but it's the
Mhm.
time
Yeah. Yeah.
that is always you know is the thing that hangs over at least my head.
Yeah. No, mine too, for sure. And I think, um, thinking about how I work on a day to day and mixing this project in, like, I think I definitely came in a bit overconfident in how easily I'd be able to inject something like this into my normal day to day.
Mhm.
I'm rather flexible. I can actually um, deal with distractions and jumping from thing to thing pretty well. I won't say it's perfect, and I'm sure there's times when I jump from task to task where I'm not fully in whatever mode I need to be in to do that my best throughout the typical day to day. But I think I can do that well enough to be like pretty darn good at my job. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But something like this, writing is not a strength of mine. Having never written something like this before, for sure. Certainly, not a strength, or I don't have a ton of history that I can lean back on and say, yeah, do this because it worked last time. Don't have any of that. Right.
Right.
So, for sure, like that ramp into it is really important for me. When, you know, with other kinds of work that I'm doing, like particularly like if I'm ever, diving into design for some reason, that's something I'm extremely comfortable with, have done for decades. So like, um, I'm actually thinking of a project right now where I was actually building a proposal for someone, and to do that and get things like pricing and stuff right, I kind of had to have an initial layout to get some things like dimensions and stuff like that. And before I knew it, like I actually kind of had something designed, and I wasn't even trying to design. I was trying to build a proposal so they knew how much this thing would cost. So like that's how natural some of that has come
Mhm.
to me. I could not have the same experience with something like writing, you know what I mean? So that's
Right.
been cool. And we'll talk about um our latest experiment with getting this thing done, which I think is our most recent example for me of how this thing's going to actually get done, which is not the way that I typically work. So,
Right. Yeah. I wonder too when we look at the difference between writing and design, if there is something about the fact that in design you can start with something, it might be digital, but it will still be tactile. You can start with something that you can see in front of you,
mhm,
and you you don't necessarily have the benefit when you're writing. You start with a blank page,
yeah,
and and that is a process of pulling things and getting them on the page. And especially for somebody like me who I have already admitted that whole just write and put the words on the page and then you can go back and edit does not work well for my brain. Um, I don't, it's not easy to get into that. Like, well, I have something here I can work with and now I can make it good. I have it,
mhm,
there is just something about my I don't know, my perfectionist personality, my whatever those things are that are the less attractive parts of my personality. Uh, it feels like they force me to, it has to be if it's going to if people are going to be able to see it, which PS they aren't until you show them, but in your brain people are going to be able to see it. It has to be perfect, as
yeah,
perfect as it can be. So,
yeah.
yeah. So, let's talk about the meeting we had last week because I think You know, and I think this has happened a couple of times on not just this project, other things where, and this is a lot of preamble for getting to this question, but it is one of my favorite sort of experiences of working with you, Ben, because every so often we have what, I will turn back later and realize is sort of a watershed discussion where something that maybe has been on my mind or bothering me or something that as a team we're struggling with has been weighing us down, and then we will have that conversation that kind of brings it open.
Mhm.
And I my feeling is this was sort of one of those.
Hmm.
So talk to me, tell me what you were thinking or feeling coming into last week's meeting.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I appreciate your preamble because it makes me feel a little bit better about what I'm going to say about the meeting, which is basically I went into it not feeling great, feeling like it was going to be crap. And I knew that one of the outcomes that was going to happen out of it was us making a decision to do something different, And I think going into this project, I knew that there was going to be, I don't know, a meeting or an email or some decision along the way that was going to happen like this, where maybe things didn't have to be absolutely terrible or be crap, but we're going to at least be in a space where we were going to have to like make a decision to do something
Hmm.
different or figure out the next step, and so it's happened, and it probably will happen again at some point throughout the process. Um, so it's interesting to like both reflect on the meeting and also think about where my brain was going into it, which
Hmm.
I guess whether I'm looking backwards or remembering what I was thinking looking forwards, I think it was a pretty similar feeling in that like didn't like it, wasn't looking forward to it, knew it wasn't going to go great, uh, and same thing looking
Hmm.
backwards, didn't love it, didn't feel great about it, but I knew that it was kind of like necessary.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know. Now that like I hear how you set up the question and everything, I guess I hadn't taken a moment to think about maybe how pivotal it's been in the process, uh, because the changes that we talked about, I think have we've turned one corner at least and have made some really nice progress because of what both of us would probably call a less than awesome meeting, or at
Mhm.
least less than awesome meeting going into it as we were thinking about it. So,
Yeah. I I was I was we were definitely in a similar place walking to that meeting. I was extremely I was bummed, I was disappointed. I let me give you 1,000 more, uh, adjectives. I was frustrated with myself. If I'm a little if I'm totally honest, I was frustrated with both of us because when we have and I don't know how many of these, so we've had 4 or 5 of these meetings previously. And, when I walking into this one, um, what what was on my mind was, like, I have really let both of us down
mm,
because I know throughout this project, you there have been a lot of times when we've come into this meeting and for really, really good reasons, you have said, "Yeah, I haven't made a lot of progress. There's, whatever." And I don't think in any of those you had to say, "Well, here's what was happening," because I knew what was happening outside of this
yeah,
project, right? So,
right.
it was easy to see why. And so I placed myself in this position of being, I'm gonna be the water carrier here. If this is what, we're 6 months in, and if out of those 6 months, 4 times we get together and situations, circumstances, whatever, are keeping Ben from being able to focus on this, then I'll just carry it. And then I come and I'm getting ready for this meeting, like, "Oh, well, you decided that you were gonna be the one to carry this burden, and now you did not. So good job, champ." So I was really, really frustrated with myself. Um, and I was frustrated with
Mm,
the circumstances that have kept you from being able to focus on it. And,
yeah,
I I basically went into this meeting ready to say, either we're gonna have to do something different or this has to go away because the path we're not on a successful path right now.
right, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting to know that that's how you were feeling. And if you mentioned that in the meeting and I forgot it, kind of like this idea of like either we got to like do something different or like scrap it. Um, because one thing that we talked about in the meeting was, kind of giving ourselves a bit of grace and
Mhm.
saying, kind of even telling ourselves, like, hey, if this thing doesn't happen this year, that's okay,
Right.
but let's not use that as a reason to sit or, unintentionally pause on things either. Um, so I'm glad that we're at where we're at, knowing that, maybe one thing that you were thinking about was maybe this thing's just not going to happen. So,
Mhm.
and I appreciate you carrying the weight because you certainly have along the way. And um, the uh, the thing that was on my mind going into that meeting about you in particular was actually not at all concerned about whether or not you were carrying the weight, but I was actually anticipating that you wouldn't be prepared because you had just gotten back from a bunch of PTO. So
Mhm.
I was like, well, I mean, when would she have been able to work on the book? If she had done anything before she left, I would know about it. She would have totally shared it. And if she's done anything since she came back and is crunching, like same thing, like I'm sure I would have seen something or whatever. And I know what it's like to kind of re-enter the atmosphere from some time off. So I didn't really expect much anyway, but and I understand that that's frustrating in itself.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so we can all agree the last meeting was less than awesome and totally necessary.
Right.
And let's move on to the next thing, huh?
Right. Right. Exactly.
So, so in that meeting, we agreed that we should take some time away from the office and do some work collaboratively. That was the big change that we talked about, and you said at that time that you had planned to suggest the same thing, but didn't think that we would agree or that I would agree with you on that. Tell me more about that. How are you feeling, or how were you feeling, or why were you thinking that?
I First of all, I should have spent more time thinking about my response to this question since I knew it was coming. But you know, reflecting back to the circumstances, the things that have kept you from being able to be uh from us being sort of at the same level engaged with this project. Um I really thought that I was going to come into that meeting. I was going to that the way it was going to go was I was going to say, I think we should um, schedule some offsite time. We should work on this offsite in some way, shape, or form. You would say, I can't see that working. I can't see there being time. There's this, that, and the other thing. And then after that is when I would drop the, well, then I don't think this is ever going to happen. Um, and I think as long as we really should have a therapist in here with us because because here comes the true confession. I didn't I had the sense that we were not that the stakes were different for the two of us. That I was trying harder is not the right word. That
Yeah.
I that
You had, to use the steaks analogy, you had more chips in the middle of the table, right? Like,
Yeah.
is that a way to say it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that I had committed more to it and that there was gonna come this tipping point where, um, you were going to realize that the reason I had committed to more to it was because that you weren't going to, right?
Mm,
That was the thing, that was the way this was gonna pivot. So, it was stressful to think about sort of drawing that line in the sand because I knew going into this, this was somewhere along one of the first conversations we had. I'm the writer. My job. This is what I do.
right.
And we talked about this being a
Yeah.
collaborative effort and this was going to be a way that you could expand your talents and all of those good things. So I never had any illusion that as far as the writing went, that it would be 100% 50-50, and that for every word I wrote, you wrote a word, that it was gonna be exactly like that,
Sure. Yeah.
but I don't know that I really reflected on what I thought that would look like, and we had gotten to a point where all I knew was uh, it was less than I thought, do you know?
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah, so
Yeah.
I felt that was pretty high stakes to say, if we're not on the same page here, then we gotta kill it. We can't,
Yeah. Right.
we can't move a thing forward that has both of our names on it if we're
Right.
not both
For
on
sure.
it.
Yeah. Well, right. Yeah. I can totally, well, I don't know if I can say I can totally understand the feeling, but I can put myself in your shoes and, see feeling that way and understand maybe the frustration and the gross feelings that
Mhm.
maybe come with that. But the good news is we were in fact maybe more on the same page about it than we even knew
We were
we were going into the meeting,
exactly.
since we both suggested exactly the same thing as to what we needed and the change that needed to happen. Um, so that's good. That's good news. That's a good outcome.
Right, right. And, the nice thing is, usually, when I catastrophize like that, we end up with a perfectly fine outcome. So, it worked. So,
Yeah.
to bring the audience into what actually happened, we that day We realized we both wanted to do a little bit of offsite time. We did what I think was a very smart thing, which is not delay doing that so that
Mhm.
we didn't have a ton of time to think of excuses and find reasons that it wouldn't work and whatever. So this 2 days ago now, we spent 3.5 hours
Yep.
working offsite, and we told the team we were going to be gone and just went and focused pretty much exclusively. Did you do anything other than working on the book when we were working that day?
Y I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, not much. I mean, there were, like, a couple of, uh, Teams chats that I responded to, and I think there was one email that I checked, but, other than that, I mean, I would say 8.5 minutes of distracted time of that 3.5 hours. Otherwise, I was pretty dialed in. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think I was right around that 8.5 to 10 minute.
Yeah.
And I did, even though we were sitting next to each other on the same side of the table, I did try to hide it from you.
Oh, well, you did well. Yeah. Yeah.
So, we both seemed to be feeling really positive about what we were accomplishing that day. It was, when you and I are in the room, the vibes are always immaculate. But
Right.
and it's just sad that people don't always get to be in the room with us when the vibes are being immaculate. But
Right.
we were feeling positive about what we accomplished. The one thing we didn't do, we hashed out a lot of things. We actually wrote a lot of things. We discovered that we
Mm.
are at conservatively 12% written somewhere on
Right.
there.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and but we didn't stop to examine how it worked, what worked well, what could we change, and those kinds of things. And mostly, uh, dear listener, so that we could do this for you. So, what
Yeah.
are your thoughts? What about it worked well? Let's start there.
Yeah. But I think just being separated, having the chunk of time and, even though we, like, literally walked across the street to another space that's very similar to the space inside of our office, just change of scenery, dedicated chunk of time, no distractions or, minimal distractions, and still in a relatively comfortable space. I think those
Mhm.
are, like, the big check boxes that we'll have to have some aspect of that the next time we do it or anytime we do it to wrap the project up or any other project that we choose to attack this way. And I think that's another thing that worked well that I think we've had proof of this in the past, but it's maybe just it's a tool or a trick that is easy to forget about. Like when you really need to get something done or catch something up or whatever, to do all of those things. Go somewhere
Mhm.
else, remove the distractions, give yourself a healthy chunk of time is a really, really great way to get things done. So, I mean, we've got a couple of other top priorities on our plate for the year that need some catch up and things like that.
Mhm.
So we need to remember this tool when it comes to getting some of those things done as well, and give whoever on the team needs that space, that time, whatever that they need, give it to them and participate with them so that
Right.
um, they can have a similar feeling as to how we're feeling right now, which is I'm feeling like back on track. Like if I could simplify it like in a few words, like I really feel like we're kind of back on track with this project, which is great.
Yeah. I think we've talked about it in the past, not on the podcast, but in real life, that we do we do seem to work well and we do seem to accomplish things on those rare occasions where you and I are working in the same space. There
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
something about the right kind of thing to do and the right purpose for what you're doing, where if we can sit in one space and work and then popcorn thoughts back and forth, I think we save ourselves a ton of time, which is otherwise going to be I write an email, then I wait for you to respond to the email, or I write it, you send a chat and I don't see the chat, and then you're checking your chats and whatever. Whatever all of those things are,
Yeah.
that if we are in the same space and can just say, "Hey, what do you think about this?" or "Look at this thing that I found." And we know that we are both very good at uh this thing that is akin to brainstorming, which is not really brainstorming, but is you saying that thing makes me think of this thing, and let's explore both of those things in tandem. Let's so we have
Yep.
now gone down this path of, oh, that reminds me, this is a important thing to talk about, and then just hash those things out in the moment
Mhm.
so that it's not we're not saving it for another time. We are dealing with things that will move us forward. And I think that's always a good experience for me, you know?
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's kind of interesting because there were definitely times, and I think anytime that we work in that atmosphere, I feel like, I'm disrupting, to bounce the idea, popcorn the thing, um, which is both like a pro and a con of working like that, right? Because I'm sure there
Mm,
were times I took you out of the flow. I know there were times where you bounced something where I kind of had to stop my train of thought or
mhm,
make a quick note so I knew I could like pick something up quick. But to be able to get that immediate feedback and then just keep rolling, the benefit of that I think outweighs maybe the disruption that can come with that.
mhm,
It's not how we could work all the time. Um, it wouldn't work on every kind of work that we do, but for this, for what we were doing, especially where we're still working with a relatively blank slate and like identifying like the structure of this thing and all of that time for that immediate feedback so that we could have those ideas and that structure and those thoughts in mind as we're writing and researching and stuff, I think is really important. So
yeah.
yeah, even
Yeah,
though it
and
maybe comes with some costs, the benefits outweigh it for sure.
right, right. Well, and in terms of that, having to come out and come back into what we're doing, I think when we are both focused, if we are both focused on the same thing, that's when it works. That's probably when we're optimized in doing this, because we are still in that same space of it. We have shifted ourselves into that working mode in that space. And so it is easier, at least for me, to like poke my head up, do the thing, and then get right back down to it. Um,
Same.
yeah. And importantly, did you listen to Eminem's new song yet?
Oh shoot, no.
Bro,
Making a
make a
note now.
note. Bro, so good. And just for the record, I want you to know that I claim that as a personal victory, that that is the only completely not related thing I said to you the whole afternoon. So,
Yeah, right. Yeah. Good job.
thank you. Thank you. So is there anything we would change?
So should we talk about what? Yeah, yeah. Um, well, first and foremost, I forgot the music, or I forgot a speaker for good music. So we were going
Mhm.
off my laptop speakers, which actually are decent, but I like good audio. So we'll bring a speaker so we have some crisper audio next time for
Okay.
sure.
Important.
Um, very important, super important. Other than that, I think that and this is something that I don't think we can learn that this is a change we need to make until we do what we just did. But I think that there were maybe some times where we got into a conversation about structure or something like that, where for us to like intentionally shift and work on something, like actively be working on something together, not like us each be writing this separate piece, maybe could get us to some quicker decisions, maybe could help us explore more options at the same time, maybe get us in the flow of that thing that we're trying to figure out together.
Mhm.
And then coming to that decision together would just help it feel, like a more collaborative decision and not just like, well, here's my idea. What do you think? And then the other person either agrees or disagrees. And then it's kind of a bit back and forthy. Um, New term, back and forthy.
I like it. I like it.
But yeah. Yeah. So yeah, just even though it's it's interesting because we were like literally working together in the same room, I think we could work together on a couple more things. But um, we went into that meeting without or with we went into that time without like a really clear plan on what specifically we were going to be working on, what challenges we needed to overcome. So maybe before our next chunk of time, we can get a couple of things out
Mhm.
on a note ahead of time and decide like, well, what's Ben going to tackle? What's Sue going to tackle? What are we going to intentionally work on together? So maybe just to shorten it up, like just a little bit of planning
Mhm.
ahead of time would maybe help a few things go just a little smoother and be a little less
Yeah.
disruptive too, I suppose.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And I think that we went into this experience needing, really needing the time and the space to get exactly what you're saying, to get to know that we have to do that. And I think part of what this spending that few hours this week did for me was reconnect me with what we're doing. And
Hmm.
honestly, if you had said, well, let's get an agenda and let's talk about what you're going to work on and let's talk about what we need to talk about collaboratively, I would have said, probably not.
Yeah.
Really don't know how I would do that because I don't know, it had been long enough, not forever, but long enough that I couldn't have told you what was done, what wasn't done, where I thought I would go next. And, and part of that is my own darn fault because I'm not writing sequentially. And so
Hmm. Yeah,
writing non-sequentially means I don't necessarily know. Yeah, I don't know what should be the next thing.
hmm, yeah, or what should be the next thing, or what things you might need support or help or
Right.
to bounce an opinion off of, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's some natural challenges that just come in like the flow and the way that we're writing this, which I'll take them because it's our first time. It's all
Right.
good.
Right.
So what's next?
We need to write a book.
Okay.
So
Nice.
there's that. Got a bunch of writing to do.
Should have known that.
Yeah, I mean, if that hasn't been clear at this point, I'm not sure what's happening. Uh I think I I know we talked about it going into this whole project, how this podcast and the interviews we would do this year could serve as inspiration. Other interviews we've done in the past could serve as some inspiration. And we are really
Mhm.
making a conscious effort to talk to every guest we have this year about purpose.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I like what you did with going through what we've already done and uh really zeroing in on those conversations that we've had. And I think
Yeah.
that that is a thing that I don't think I know we'll continue to do that for sure.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. We've got some great guests booked already that are coming up that like I'm really excited to ask them some of those questions related to purpose and hear what they have to say. I was pleasantly surprised. And this is something that I suppose I should recognize as a thing that went well. Me going through the transcripts of the podcasts and picking out some of those nuggets. I think I actually
Mhm.
used in the file name of all those notes. Um, I was surprised how much I was able to gather, like just quotes from people or, thoughts or ideas that they had related to their own purpose or, something greater beyond them. Um, we've had some really great guests and some
Mhm.
people that have had some really cool things to say. And so to kind of relive that and re experience that and capture some things that I think are totally going to make the book um, felt like even though it was like a page and a quarter of notes or something, just felt like a ton of progress. So that was really cool. And I'm excited to gather more for sure.
Yeah. I think an experience that I have uh, on some with those podcasts is once they are recorded, um, as much as I am, I work hard to be really fully present in the moment and be a good interviewer and be a good, sort of partner to the person talking and all of that. Uh, just the pace of the work we do goes by so quickly. We step out of those, and
Mm,
I could not tell you a word that has been said in that entire interview anymore.
yeah,
Literally the next
yeah,
day. So
yeah,
as I go back through and like I'm working on transcripts or whatever else I'm doing, it it is always astonishing some of the really deeply moving and smart things that we hear. I mean, and not to say I shouldn't be
yeah,
astonished because these are great people, but
right,
also
yeah,
these, especially this year, we have had a lot more interviews with people that don't know us. So it made
right,
sense to me when we were having those good conversations with people we knew. But once we started having them with people who were basically total strangers, uh, I started to, that just really is what's astonishing about it. These people have been so open to just completely laying, that kind of stuff, big thoughts, deep thoughts out on the table and being really honest and open about
mhm,
it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
That was not a good way to end that sentence, but it's been awesome. I love
You
it a
did
lot.
it. You landed the plane.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other next thing to work on is to work on how we can continue to collaborate and bring it all together, right? Which um, hopefully before our next big chunk of time to work on it, there's some time in between that maybe happens a bit more naturally, or we're able to share some continued progress. So,
Mhm.
but admittedly, a trap that I'm a little afraid of, especially knowing how well that small chunk of time went, um, is that we're going to like fall back to like that's the only way we can make progress on this thing is to
Mhm.
every once a month block this big chunk of time, and that's the only time we're going to work on it. So that'll definitely be a challenge for me is to continue to um, make progress in between. But I can already kind of envision some ways that that'll happen. Some of the initial work that I did during our chunk of time was kind of like analyzing the outline, doing a bit of research, making kind of like some high level notes, and then I kind of converted into writing time. So I think if I can do all that pre work, the little stuff that maybe is a bit more bite sized, um, do that between, and then use that chunk of time to really focus on writing, reviewing, editing.
Mhm.
I think the progress will feel even better after those chunks. So, but we'll see. We'll see if I can prove myself right on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like the idea of having all of that sort of set up ahead of time. And then, especially because it is much easier to hop in and out of strategic sort of thoughts than it is the
Mhm.
writing part of it,
Right.
you know? So, yeah. So, you know what, man? Onward, upward.
Yeah. Here we go.
I think we're doing it.
Yeah.
And we are very excited to have our listeners continuing on this journey with us. Um,
Always.
yeah. You can always learn more about this whole project, anything we do, all of the things we do by visiting our website, why did we make that so hard to say? Exclamationqso.com. And check
You
out
got
our
it.
blog, exclamationqso.com/blog, and see everything we do.
That's right. Thanks, Sue. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Be awesome. We'll see you next time.
The Osmology Podcast is a production of Exclamation Services. Thanks to Nick Mulliver for sound production and Kylie Ganther for our cover artwork.
Executive producers are me, Ben Bauer, and my friend Suzanne Campbell.